Leah! Oh my God, Leah! The billionaire's voice cut through the hallway as he ran toward his daughter. She was on the floor trembling, hands pressed to her ears as sound hit her for the first time in 10 years. Beside her, a young maintenance worker knelt with tweezers shaking in his hand, the metal tips holding the dark object he had just removed, something every specialist had missed for a decade. Minutes earlier, the billionaire had burst in thinking this worker was hurting her. Now he stood frozen, realizing this young man had uncovered something no one else had ever seen, and whatever came next would change everything. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from, subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Marcus Webb's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He knelt on the polished hardwood floor of the Morrison estate in Highland Park, Dallas, staring at the tweezers in his palm. Something dark and wet clung to the metal tips, something that had just come out of 10-year-old Leah Morrison's ear, something that shouldn't have been there at all. Behind him, Thomas Carter, head of security, ex-Army Ranger, 240 pounds of muscle and suspicion, had his hand on his radio, seconds away from calling the police. Step away from the girl, Thomas's voice cut through the air like a blade. Right now, Webb. But Marcus couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because Leah, sweet, deaf, silent Leah, who'd never made a sound in her entire life, was sitting up on the floor with her hands pressed to her ears, her pale blue eyes huge and terrified. And she was making sounds, not crying, not whimpering. Rough, unformed sounds, vocal cords that had never been used, trying desperately to work. "Ah!" she gasped, her voice raw and broken, sounds more than words. Her face twisted in distress as she pressed her hands tighter to her ears. Too loud. Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. "Leah! It's okay, what did you do to my daughter?" The voice came from the doorway, cold, controlled, deadly. Alexander Morrison stood there in his perfectly tailored suit, his CEO mask cracking to show something underneath that Marcus had never seen before. Terror, pure parental terror. "Mr. Morrison, I can explain," Marcus started, but Thomas was already moving, grabbing Marcus's shoulder, yanking him away from Leah. "Don't move," Thomas growled. "Hands where I can see them." Marcus raised his hands, the tweezers still clutched in his right palm. His whole body shook with adrenaline and fear, and the crushing realization that he'd just done something either miraculous or catastrophic, and he wouldn't know which until someone believed him. Alexander crossed the room but stopped several feet from his daughter. His hands trembled at his sides. For a moment, he just stared. This man who controlled boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, completely frozen by the impossible. "Baby?" His voice came out uncertain. "Daddy's here. Can you hear me?" Leah lifted her head. Tears streamed down her face. She tried to form words, her mouth moving awkwardly, sounds rough and unpracticed. "Dad." The air in that hallway froze. She tried again, her whole face scrunching with the effort of using muscles she'd never consciously controlled. "I hear you." Each word separate, broken, but unmistakable. Alexander Morrison, billionaire tech CEO, the man Forbes called the coldest entrepreneur in Dallas, went very still. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. Thomas's grip on Marcus's shoulder loosened slightly. "Sir, what's happening?" Alexander couldn't answer. He stood there, frozen between disbelief and hope. "Look at the tweezers," Marcus said quietly into the charged silence. "Please, sir, just look." Alexander's eyes moved to Marcus's outstretched hand, at the tweezers, at the dark mass stuck to their tips. "What is that?" "It's not what you think," Marcus said carefully. "This isn't a living insect that's been in there for years, that would be impossible. What I removed is the remains of an insect, probably something small that crawled into her ear when she was an infant. It died there, deep in the canal. Over the years it became encased in dead tissue, earwax, and scar tissue. A solid mass that completely blocked her ear canal from the outside world." Alexander stared at the dried, blackened mass on the tweezers. "That's impossible. She's been examined by the best specialists in the world, who were all looking for something neurological," Marcus interrupted gently. "Brain problems, nerve damage. They did MRIs, Connecticut scans, genetic tests. But sir, did anyone ever do a basic physical examination of her ear canal? With just a flashlight and an otoscope, did anyone check for a simple blockage? The question hung in the air like an accusation. The blockage was deep, Marcus continued, finding his voice. At an angle that would be difficult to see without the right positioning and light. And once she was diagnosed with sensorineural deafness, neurological deafness, every doctor after that would have looked at that diagnosis and focused on confirming it, not questioning it. Thomas had released Marcus completely now, confusion replacing suspicion on his face. Leah pressed her hands to her ears again, whimpering. Too many sounds. Alexander looked from his daughter to Marcus, and back again. His breathing had become unsteady, the perfect posture wavered, something was breaking inside him. Marcus could see it happening in real time, like watching ice crack under pressure. How did you? Alexander's voice broke. He tried again. How did you know? Because I was paying attention, sir, and because my mom taught me to look for simple answers before assuming complex ones. Alexander finally moved, dropping to his knees beside his daughter. His hands hovered helplessly over her, shaking. When he touched her shoulder, his fingers trembled so violently that Leah looked up in alarm. I'm here, baby, he whispered. Daddy's here. And then slowly, like a dam beginning to fracture, he broke. His face crumpled, his shoulders shook, and he pulled Leah into his arms. In that moment, for the first time in the 8 months Marcus had worked on the estate, the impenetrable CEO was gone. All that remained was a father frightened, grateful and completely undone. It would later seem unimaginable that anyone could look at Marcus and see anything but the young man who had just saved a child's life. Yet minutes earlier, with a security guard gripping his radio and suspicion thick in the air, Marcus stood on the edge of losing everything. To understand how he reached that impossible moment, how a 22-year-old maintenance worker ended up performing an unauthorized medical procedure on a billionaire's daughter, we need to return to where the first thread began. 3 months earlier, Marcus Webb was good at being invisible. At 22, he had perfected the art of moving through wealthy homes without ever leaving a trace. No eye contact, no unnecessary conversation. Fix what's broken, tighten what's loose, and disappear before the residents ever remember his name. That was the rule in Highland Park, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Dallas, where homes started at $3 million, and the people inside them had more money than Marcus would see in 10 lifetimes. Marcus didn't mind being invisible. Invisible meant safe, invisible meant employed. And employment meant he could keep the lights on in the cramped 2-bedroom apartment he shared with his 12-year-old sister Maya in East Dallas, where rent was overdue and the landlord's patience was running thin. The Morrison estate was his biggest account, 3 stories of glass and limestone, with an infinity pool and enough smart home technology to launch a spaceship. Marcus came twice a week to maintain the systems, replace filters, fix whatever broke in a house that size. He'd been working there for 3 months when he first saw the girl. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March. Texas sun blazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Marcus replaced a circuit breaker in the upstairs hallway. That's when he felt it, not heard it, but felt it, a presence. He turned around. A girl stood at the end of the hallway. Maybe 9 or 10 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, pale blue eyes that seemed too old for her young face. Yellow sundress that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. She watched him with the wariness of a shelter dog, ready to bolt, ready to be hurt. Marcus lifted his hand in a friendly wave. Hey there. The girl didn't respond, didn't smile, didn't even blink. Marcus tried again, speaking slower. I'm Marcus, I work here fixing things. What's your name? Nothing. The girl just stared at him for another long moment, then turned and walked away. Her footsteps made no sound on the hardwood. Marcus stood there confused and oddly unsettled. He'd been in this house for 3 months and had never seen this kid. Never heard her voice, her footsteps, any sign she existed. That's Mr. Morrison's daughter. Marcus jumped. Thomas Carter stood behind him, 6 feet of ex-military muscle, arms crossed over his chest. Didn't mean to scare her, Marcus said carefully. Just said hello. She can't hear you. Thomas's tone was flat, matter of fact. She's deaf, profoundly deaf, can't hear anything at all. Born that way. The words landed heavy in Marcus's chest. He looked back down the empty hallway. Does she have people to talk to? She has a tutor, speech therapist, doctors, everything she needs. Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? No reason, just curious. Don't be. Thomas stepped closer. Do your job, stay out of family business, and we won't have any problems. Clear, clear, Marcus said. But that night, lying in bed while Maya snored softly in the other room, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about that girl, about how alone she'd looked, about those two old eyes in that too young face, about how he knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. The next morning during his lunch break, Marcus pulled out his phone and searched how to say hello in sign language. Wait, I need to tell you something about Marcus before we go further, because understanding where he came from, what he'd lost and what he was fighting for, makes everything that happened next mean something more. Marcus Webb grew up in South Dallas, in a neighborhood where survival wasn't guaranteed, and dreams were luxuries most people couldn't afford. His mother, Patricia Webb, was a nurse at Parkland Hospital, the public hospital where Dallas's poorest patients went when they had nowhere else to go. Patricia worked doubles, triples, any shift they'd give her. She worked holidays and overnight and through exhaustion that made her hands shake. She did it to keep food on the table and to save money just a little bit at a time for Marcus's college fund. She was the kind of nurse patients asked for by name, the kind who remembered birthdays and held hands during scary procedures and stayed late without pay because someone needed her. She didn't just treat symptoms, she saw people, really saw them. Baby, she used to tell Marcus when he was young, studying at their kitchen table while she caught a few hours of sleep between shifts. Most people walk through life blind. They see problems, not people. They see diagnoses, not humans. You want to make a real difference? Learn to see what others miss. Marcus was 17 when his mother started losing weight, getting tired, having pain she blamed on long shifts and getting older. He begged her for months to see a doctor, but she kept putting it off. She couldn't afford to miss work, couldn't risk the medical bills if something was wrong. By the time she finally went, after Marcus literally begged her with tears in his eyes, the breast cancer was stage 4, metastasized, terminal. Marcus's hands had trembled that day in the hospital, the day he tried to help his mother administer her pain medication because she was too weak to do it herself. He'd been so scared of hurting her, of making a mistake. Baby, sometimes you gotta do something even when you're terrified, she'd told him, her voice thin with pain. That's not bravery, that's just love doing what needs to be done. She died 6 months later, 2 weeks after Marcus's 18th birthday. The medical bills came to over $200,000, despite her insurance, despite working at a hospital, despite doing everything right. Those bills swallowed Marcus's college fund, swallowed his mother's savings, swallowed any chance he had of going to UT Dallas on his partial scholarship. Because the scholarship covered tuition, but not housing, not food, not utilities. And someone had to take care of Maya, who was only 9 years old and had just lost the only parent she'd ever known. Marcus made a choice, or rather the choice made itself. He got a job with a property maintenance company. He moved Maya into a cheaper apartment. He became invisible so his sister wouldn't disappear into foster care. And he taught himself medicine from his mother's old textbooks, not because he thought he'd ever use it, but because reading about anatomy and pharmacology and emergency procedures made him feel close to her, made him feel like maybe her dream for him wasn't completely dead. Would you make that choice? Give up your future so your little sister has one? Marcus did, and he never once complained about it, not even to himself. The next time Marcus saw Leah Morrison, he was ready. He was checking the pool filtration system in the backyard when she appeared at the edge of the garden, holding a sketchbook against her chest like a shield. She watched him for a long moment with those wary eyes. Marcus straightened up, wiped his hands on his work pants, and lifted his right hand. Slowly, carefully, he formed the sign he'd practiced 100 times in his bathroom mirror. Hello. Leah's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened slightly. She stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, she signed back. Hello. Marcus grinned so hard, his face hurt. He signed the next phrase he'd learned. My name M-A-R-C. He had to fingerspell it. He hadn't learned enough vocabulary yet. Leah tilted her head, studying him with new interest. Then she fingerspelled back. L-I-A. Nice meet you. The wariness in Leah's face cracked, just a little. Underneath it was something Marcus recognized instantly: loneliness. The bone-deep kind that came from being surrounded by people who didn't know how to see you. Leah walked closer. She signed something fast and fluid, way beyond Marcus's YouTube education. Marcus held up his hands apologetically and signed, "Slow please, still learning." Leah's expression softened. She signed again, exaggerating each movement. "You learning for me?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, why? How do you explain compassion to someone who's never received it?" Marcus thought for a moment, then signed the only thing that felt true. "You look lonely." "Me too." Leah stared at him. Then something happened that made Marcus's chest hurt. She smiled. A real smile. Bright and surprised and grateful and sad all at once. She sat down on the grass nearby, opened her sketchbook, and started drawing while Marcus went back to work. They didn't sign anything else that afternoon, but every few minutes Marcus would glance over and catch her peeking at him from behind her sketchbook, and every time their eyes met, she'd smile. When Marcus's shift ended and he packed up his tools, he found a piece of paper tucked into his toolbox, a drawing of two stick figures, one tall with curly hair, one small with long blonde hair, waving at each other. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, "Thank you for seeing me." Leah. Marcus kept that drawing in his truck's glove box, looked at it every morning before work, because it reminded him why being invisible was worth it. If being invisible meant he could make one lonely kid feel less alone. Over the next 2 months, Marcus and Leah developed a quiet friendship. Marcus practiced sign language every night, Maya quizzing him with flashcards they'd made from index cards. Then he'd use his new vocabulary with Leah during his shifts at the estate. He learned she loved horses and art and looking at the stars, that her favorite color was yellow because it was the brightest, that she was terrified of hospitals because she'd spent years being poked and prodded by specialists trying to fix her. He learned she'd been to medical centers in Houston, New York, London and Berlin, that she'd been subjected to MRIs, Connecticut scans, cochlear implant evaluations and experimental treatments, that every single doctor had said the same thing: her hearing loss was neurological, permanent, incurable. And he learned something else, something that worried him more each day. Leah kept touching her right ear, a quick press with her fingertips, a wince, then she'd lower her hand like nothing happened. It was subtle, most people wouldn't notice. But Marcus had spent a year watching his mother hide pain, and he knew what it looked like when someone hurt, but didn't want to admit it. He didn't say anything at first, didn't want to push, but the touches became more frequent. The winces got deeper, until one afternoon, in late May, when Marcus found Leah sitting alone by the pool with both hands pressed to the side of her head, her face twisted in pain. He sat down next to her carefully and signed, "You okay?" Leah lowered her hands quickly, forcing a smile. "Yes, fine." "You lying?" Her smile faltered. "How you know?" Marcus thought about his mother, about all the times she'd said "I'm fine" when she was anything but. About the lesson she'd taught him: watch people, not just their words. "My mom was nurse," he signed slowly. "She teach me watch people." "You hurting?" Leah's eyes filled with tears. She signed slowly, heavily. "Ear hurt." "Many days." "How many?" She held up 5 fingers. 5 days. 5 days of pain, and she'd told no one. "You tell Dad." Leah shook her head violently, fear bright in her eyes. "Why not?" Her hands moved fast now. Desperate. "Doctors hurt me. Always testing. Always needles. Always machines so loud I feel them vibrate." Scared Marcus, so scared, they never help, just hurt more. Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. This 10-year-old girl had been in pain for 5 days and was too traumatized by the medical system to ask for help, just like his mother had been too scared of medical bills to go to the doctor until it was too late. The system had failed both of them, and Marcus was tired of watching it happen. "Can I look?" He signed carefully. "Promise gentle. I not doctor, just friend who cares." Leah studied his face for a long time. Marcus could see her weighing trust against fear, hope against past hurt. Finally, slowly, she nodded. Marcus wasn't a doctor, wasn't a nurse, wasn't anything except a maintenance worker who'd read his dead mother's medical textbooks because it made him feel less alone. But he knew how to look. His mother had taught him that. Most people see what they expect to see. she used to say during their late-night study sessions when Marcus was in high school and she'd come home from a particularly hard shift. They walk into a room already decided about what's wrong, and that's all they can see. But if you want to really help someone, you gotta look past your expectations, look at what's actually there. So Marcus looked. He pulled out his phone and switched on the LED flashlight he used for checking electrical panels. "Turn your head," he signed, "just a little." Leah did, her small hand gripping his wrist so tight it hurt, trusting him even though she was terrified. The afternoon sun slanted through the pool house windows. In its light, Marcus could see into Leah's ear canal. At first nothing unusual, just pink tissue, maybe slightly inflamed. Then he adjusted the angle of his phone. The light caught something, not deep in the canal pressed against the eardrum, but there at the opening. A dark mass, partially visible. As if years of natural ear movement, Leah's own attempts to touch her ear, had slowly worked it toward the surface. And when the light hit it at the right angle, Marcus could see texture, old dried tissue, something that had been there for a very, very long time. Marcus pulled back, his heart racing. "Jesus," he breathed. Leah's eyes went huge with alarm. What wrong?" Marcus forced himself to take a breath. "Think, don't panic." He'd seen something like this before, in one of his mother's emergency medicine textbooks. A case study about a child with a foreign object lodged in the ear canal for years. He pulled up Google on his phone with shaking hands. "Foreign object ear canal, hearing loss child." The results loaded. Marcus scrolled fast, his heart sinking with each article. Case study, boy, age 8, misdiagnosed with sensory neural hearing loss. Foreign body discovered after 6 years. Conductive versus sensory neural hearing loss. Importance of otoscopic examination. Oral foreign bodies in children, commonly overlooked cause of hearing impairment. Marcus read faster, pieces clicking together in his mind. If something had completely blocked Leah's ear canal since she was an infant, if sound waves never reached her eardrum, if the middle ear bones never vibrated, if the auditory nerve never received signals, the brain would interpret that exactly like neurological deafness. The neural pathways would underdevelop from lack of stimulation. The scans would show exactly what Leah's doctors had been seeing for 10 years, but it wouldn't be genetic, it would be mechanical, and mechanical problems could be fixed. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. He looked back at Leah, who sat frozen with worry. "Leah, I think something's in your ear, something blocking it, something that's been there a very long time. Can you take out?" The question was so simple, so trusting. Marcus thought about Thomas's warnings, about his job, about the rent he owed, about what would happen if he tried this and failed, if he ruptured Leah's eardrum, caused an infection, made everything worse. But he also thought about his mother lying in that hospital bed, making him promise, "Baby, find something that matters, do something that matters." And he thought about Leah, 10 years old in pain, too scared of the system to ask for help. The smart choice was obvious. Tell Alexander Morrison, get Leah to a real doctor. But Leah was staring at him with those pale blue eyes, and he could see the question in them. "You going make me go hospital?" Marcus made a decision that would either save both their lives or destroy them. "I try," he signed. "But if I can't do it safe, we tell Dad. Deal." Leah bit her lip, then nodded. "Deal. Wait here. I get supplies." Have you ever stood at a crossroads where one choice is safe and smart and the other is terrifying but right? Where playing by the rules means someone suffers but breaking them might destroy you? Marcus stood at that crossroads. One call to Alexander Morrison and he'd keep his job, avoid liability, do everything by the book. But that little girl would end up in another hospital. More tests, more trauma, more pain. And maybe some specialist would eventually figure out what Marcus had spotted in 5 minutes. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd send her home still deaf, still suffering, because sometimes the smartest people miss the obvious truth when they're looking for something complex. Marcus went to his truck. His hands shook as he gathered what he needed: his LED penlight, the precision tweezers he used for electrical work, alcohol wipes, antiseptic. This was insane. This was illegal. This was medical practice without a license on a child whose father could destroy him with one phone call. But Marcus thought about his mother's voice. "Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules, baby." He walked back to where Leah waited, still as a statue. This might feel strange, he signed. If hurt, tell me stop immediately. Okay, okay. Turn head, stay very still. Leah turned her head. The sun illuminated her ear canal. Marcus cleaned his hands and the tweezers with antiseptic, then switched on his penlight. There it was, revealed in the afternoon light. A dark mass at the opening of the ear canal. Not deep inside, but right there where Marcus could see it clearly. About 6 millimeters across, oval-shaped. The years had loosened it, worked it forward just enough. Marcus examined it carefully. The edge was partially exposed. He wouldn't need to insert the tweezers deep, he could grasp just the outer edge right at the canal entrance. His hands trembled. He took a breath, steadied himself, thought of his mother's words one more time. Love doing what needs to be done. Okay, Marcus whispered, even though Leah couldn't hear him. Okay, you can do this. He positioned the tweezers, not inserting them into the canal but positioning them at the very opening, grasping the exposed edge of the mass. Hold very still. He signed one more time. Then because she needed to hear it even though she couldn't. I've got you, Leah. I promise I've got you. He closed the tweezers gently on the exposed edge. The old tissue resisted. Marcus increased pressure carefully, just enough to grip, not enough to push it deeper. Then he pulled, gently, steadily. Resistance. The thing was stuck, embedded in old wax, adhered to the canal wall by years of buildup. Leah whimpered, a sound that broke Marcus's heart. But she didn't pull away. Almost, Marcus murmured. Almost there. He adjusted the angle slightly, pulled again, a bit more firmly, and then it came free all at once. The entire mass slid out, one solid piece. Marcus withdrew the tweezers, and there it was, a dark, dried thing about 7 millimeters long. Not living, hadn't been living for years. The desiccated remains of what might have been a small insect, encased in a cocoon of dead tissue, earwax, and scar tissue that had formed around it over a decade. Marcus set the tweezers down on a paper towel, his whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief and disbelief. He'd actually done it. Leah made a sound, not pain, something else, something that made the hair on Marcus's arms stand up. Her eyes were huge, locked on Marcus's face. Her mouth opened and closed, opened again. Then she spoke. I hear. The words were rough, malformed, the voice of someone using vocal cords for the first time, but they were words. Marcus couldn't breathe. Leah, I hear something, I hear. Her voice rose, wonder mixing with terror. I hear you. And then the world came crashing down on her all at once. Every sound she'd never heard in 10 years of life, wind in the trees, water splashing in the pool, birds singing, her own heartbeat, her own breathing, Marcus's voice, all of it flooding her senses simultaneously. Too much. Way too much. Leah's hands flew to her ears and she screamed. Marcus heard shouting from inside the house, running footsteps, getting closer. He looked down at the tweezers, at the thing still glistening on their tips, at Leah doubled over and crying, and reality crashed over him like a wave. He just performed an illegal medical procedure on a child, and it didn't matter that it had worked. Didn't matter that he'd helped her, because no one was going to believe him. The pool house door burst open. Thomas Carter came through like a battering ram, his hand already reaching for his weapon. Get away from her. Thomas roared. Get down. Marcus raised his hands, the tweezers still clutched in his palm. Wait, I didn't hurt her. On the ground. Now. Marcus dropped to his knees, then forward onto his stomach, hands behind his head. The concrete was hot against his face. From this angle, he could see Leah still crying, still holding her ears. He could also see Alexander Morrison appear in the doorway. The billionaire CEO took one look at his daughter screaming on the ground, and one look at Marcus face down, and went absolutely white. What did you do? His voice came out quiet, deadly quiet. What the hell did you do to my daughter? That's when we came back to the beginning. To the moment where everything hangs in the balance, where Marcus has to convince a terrified father that he just saved his daughter, not hurt her, where one wrong word could end everything. But sometimes, the truth is all you have. Check the tweezers, Marcus said, his voice muffled against concrete. Please sir, just look at what's on the tweezers. Don't touch anything. Thomas barked, his hand still near his weapon. But Alexander Morrison was already moving. He crossed to where the tweezers lay on the paper towel, knelt down, and stared at what clung to their tips. The silence stretched like pulled taffy. Marcus stayed face down on the concrete, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might crack a rib. "What?" Alexander's voice came out hoarse. "What is this?" "Foreign body," Marcus said carefully, still not moving. It was in her ear, at the opening of the canal, partially visible. "I think it's been there for years, sir, maybe since she was a baby. The remains of an insect, encased in dead tissue and earwax. A complete blockage. That's impossible." But Alexander's voice had lost its certainty. "She's been examined by specialists." "Neurologists," Marcus interrupted. "Brain doctors, people looking at auditory nerves and cochlear structures. But did anyone ever look in her actual with just a flashlight? Did anyone check for blockage?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Thomas had lowered his hand from his weapon, confusion replacing the aggression on his face. He looked from Marcus to Alexander to Leah, trying to piece together what was happening. Leah had lowered her hands from her ears slightly. Tears streaked her face, but she wasn't screaming anymore. She was staring at her father with wonder and overwhelm all tangled together. "Dad," she said, and the word came out clearer this time, more shaped. "I can hear you." Alexander went completely still. His hands started shaking. "Baby?" His voice cracked. "Can you really? I can hear your voice." Leah's own voice trembled, still rough but more controlled. "It sounds different than I imagined. But I know it's you." Alexander made a sound that wasn't quite a word, half sob, half gasp. He reached for his daughter and pulled her into his arms, and this time Marcus saw the billionaire's perfect composure shatter completely. His shoulders shook, his face pressed into Leah's blonde hair, and he cried like a man who'd been holding everything in for 10 years and couldn't hold it anymore. Thomas slowly removed his hand from his radio entirely. "Sir, I don't understand what's happening." Alexander lifted his head. His eyes were red, his face wet, his CEO mask completely gone. He looked at Marcus, still face down on the concrete. "Get up," he said quietly. Marcus pushed himself up slowly, brushing concrete dust off his work shirt. His knees ached, his hands still shook. Alexander stood, keeping one arm around Leah. He studied Marcus for a long moment, this young maintenance worker who'd just done the impossible. "How did you know to look?" Alexander's voice was steadier now, but softer than Marcus had ever heard it. "Leah told me her ear hurt, said it had been hurting for 5 days, but she was too scared to tell you because..." Marcus glanced at Leah. "Because she's been through enough. She didn't want more hospitals, more tests." Alexander's jaw tightened. "She told you in sign language." "Yes, sir. A language you learned." "Why, exactly?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Because nobody else was talking to her, sir. And she looked lonely." The words landed heavy. Alexander flinched like he'd been slapped. "I see." He was quiet for a moment, then turned to Thomas. "Call Dr. Brown. Sarah Brown from Dallas Children's Medical Center. Tell her it's an emergency and I need her here immediately. I don't care if she's in surgery. I don't care if she's on vacation. Get her here." "Yes, sir." Thomas pulled out his phone and stepped away. Alexander looked back at Marcus. "You removed this yourself, with no medical training." "No formal training, sir. But my mother was a nurse. She taught me some things. And I've been studying on my own for years, textbooks, online courses. I know it was risky. I know I could have made things worse. But Leah was in pain, and she trusted me, and I couldn't walk away. You could have called me, told me what was wrong. And you would have taken her to a hospital." Marcus met Alexander's eyes, and she would have been traumatized all over again. More tests, more procedures, more doctors who don't believe her when she says something hurts. Alexander's face paled. "Has that happened before?" "I don't know, sir. You'd have to ask Leah." Alexander turned to his daughter. He signed as he spoke, his movements clumsy but deliberate. "Baby, have doctors dismissed you before, when you tried to tell them about pain?" Leah nodded, tears welling up again. She signed back, and Alexander's face went from pale to gray. "What did she say?" Marcus asked quietly. "She said." Alexander's voice broke. "She said she's tried to tell people about her ear hurting before, multiple times, but everyone assumed it was frustration with being deaf, behavioral, not real pain." Marcus felt the familiar rage rising, the same rage he'd felt watching his mother's symptoms get dismissed, watching the bills pile up, watching the system fail the people who needed it most. but he pushed it down. Rage didn't help right now. Leah needed calm. Mr. Morrison, Marcus said carefully. She needs help processing this. All the sound is hitting her at once. She's been in silence for 10 years. It's overwhelming. Does she have noise-canceling headphones? Something to control the input while her brain adjusts. Alexander blinked, snapping back to father mode. Thomas already on it. Thomas was jogging toward the house. Be right back. Leah had pressed her hands to her ears again, whimpering softly. Alexander gathered her closer, and Marcus saw something he'd never expected to see. Helplessness on the face of a man who was used to solving every problem with money and power. What do I do? Alexander asked, and for the first time, he sounded lost. How do I help her? Talk to her, Marcus said. Keep your voice soft. Let her know it's okay to be overwhelmed. And when Thomas brings those headphones, let her control how much sound she takes in. Baby steps, Mr. Morrison. She's learning to hear. That's not something you rush. Alexander nodded, then leaned down and spoke softly to Leah, signing as he went. Marcus couldn't hear what he said, but he saw Leah relax slightly in her father's arms. Thomas returned with high-end noise-canceling headphones. Leah put them on gratefully, and the relief on her face was immediate. The world went from overwhelming to manageable. She lifted one headphone slightly, testing, heard her father's voice, smiled through her tears, pressed it back down. Alexander looked at Marcus again, and this time his expression held something Marcus couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but also guilt. Deep, painful guilt. Mr. Webb, Alexander said quietly, if you've done what I think you've done, if you've given me back my daughter's hearing when every specialist in the world told me it was impossible, then I owe you something that can't be measured in money. You don't owe me anything, sir. I just wanted to help. No, Alexander's voice was firm. You did something I should have done years ago. You paid attention. You listened. You saw my daughter as a person, not a problem to solve. His throat worked. I've been her father for 10 years, and a stranger had to teach me how to see her. Before Marcus could respond, Thomas called out from the house entrance. Dr. Brown's on her way. ETA 20 minutes. Dr. Sarah Brown arrived in 18 minutes, which told Marcus everything he needed to know about how seriously she took Alexander Morrison's emergency calls. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked black hair, and the kind of steady presence that probably made terrified parents feel like everything would be okay. She came through the door with a medical bag in one hand and a tablet in the other, her eyes already scanning the room for the crisis. Alexander, what's the emergency? Your call said something about Leah hearing. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Leah sitting on the couch, wearing noise-canceling headphones, very obviously responding to sounds around her. Dr. Brown's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not possible, she said flatly. Apparently it is. Alexander gestured to Marcus, still standing awkwardly by the wall in his dirty work clothes. Dr. Brown, this is Marcus Webb. He's the reason we called you. Dr. Brown's sharp eyes fixed on Marcus. You're medical personnel? No, ma'am. Maintenance worker. Her eyebrows rose, but she was too professional to comment. Instead she turned to Alexander. Tell me exactly what happened. From the beginning. Alexander did, his voice steady but strained. He explained about Leah's ear pain, about Marcus's examination, about the foreign body removal. As he talked, he showed Dr. Brown the sealed plastic bag containing the mass Marcus had removed, and the photos Marcus had taken on his phone. Dr. Brown's expression went from skeptical to stunned to professionally angry as she examined the evidence. You're telling me, she said slowly, that a foreign body has been lodged in your daughter's ear canal for potentially years, and not one doctor discovered it. That's what we need you to confirm. Alexander said. Dr. Brown's jaw tightened. Let me examine her. The examination took 30 minutes. Dr. Brown was gentle and thorough, using an otoscope to look into both of Leah's ears, taking photographs, asking questions through a combination of speech and sign language. Marcus stayed in the corner, trying to be invisible again, but Dr. Brown kept glancing at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Finally, she straightened and turned to Alexander. Her face was carefully neutral, but Marcus could see tension in her shoulders. The right ear canal is clear now. The eardrum is intact, remarkably intact, given what was removed. There's some inflammation and old scarring on the canal wall, consistent with long-term irritation from a foreign body. But structurally, everything looks good. So she can hear, Alexander said. It wasn't a question. Mr. Morrison, I need to see Leah's complete medical history before I can say anything definitive. Every test, every scan, every doctor's note from the past 10 years, already pulled up. Alexander handed her his tablet. Everything's there. Dr. Brown sat down and read in silence. The minutes stretched. Marcus watched her face change, confusion giving way to disbelief, then to something that looked like professional fury. When she finally looked up, her voice was very controlled. Your daughter has been diagnosed with profound bilateral sensory neural hearing loss since she was 8 months old. Every test supported this diagnosis. MRI showed underdeveloped auditory pathways. ABR testing showed no auditory brainstem response. Cochlear implant evaluation deemed her unsuitable because the auditory nerve appeared non-functional. Yes, Alexander said impatiently, we know all that. What we want to know is it was all based on a false premise. Dr. Brown's voice cut through like a scalpel. Your daughter doesn't have sensory neural hearing loss. She has had conductive hearing loss caused by a complete blockage of the ear canal. She pulled up scans on her tablet. Look at these MRI results from 3 years ago. The radiologist noted underdeveloped auditory pathways consistent with congenital sensory neural hearing loss. That's technically accurate. The pathways are underdeveloped, but they missed the cause. She switched to another image. The ear canal is a narrow space, only about 2.5 centimeters long in an adult, even less in a child. MRI resolution for such a small anatomical space is poor, especially when the imaging protocol is focused on the brain and auditory nerves. A physical obstruction here, she pointed, wouldn't show up clearly on an MRI. It might appear as normal tissue variation, or be missed entirely, but surely an otoscope examination, Alexander started, should have caught it, absolutely. Dr. Brown's voice was hard. But diagnostic anchoring is powerful, Mr. Morrison. Once your daughter was labeled with sensory neural deafness, probably after her first ABR test as an infant, showed no auditory response. Every subsequent examination was interpreted through that lens. She pulled up more notes. Every doctor who saw her after that initial diagnosis was primed to look for neurological causes. They did genetic testing, advanced brain imaging, cochlear evaluations, all looking for problems in the brain, the nerve, the cochlea. No one thought to check the most basic thing, is sound actually reaching the eardrum? Alexander's face had gone white. You're saying she was never neurologically deaf. I'm saying the neurological findings were a consequence of the blockage, not the cause of the deafness. Dr. Brown's voice softened slightly. If sound waves can't reach the eardrum because of a complete physical obstruction, the middle ear bones can't vibrate. The cochlea receives no mechanical stimulation. The auditory nerve sends no signals to the brain. Over years the neural pathways fail to develop properly because they never receive input during critical development periods. Use it or lose it. She pulled up the MRI scans again. On a brain scan, underdeveloped auditory pathways from lack of stimulation look identical to underdeveloped pathways from genetic causes. The structures themselves are intact in your daughter's case, they were just never activated. Which means with time, therapy and proper auditory input, there's potential for significant improvement, possibly even near normal hearing. Alexander pressed both hands to his face, his shoulders shook. Leah, watching from the couch, lifted one side of her headphones. Dad, you okay? Alexander lowered his hands and looked at his daughter. Tears streamed down his face. I'm better than okay, baby, he managed. I'm just so sorry it took this long. Dr. Brown cleared her throat. Mr. Morrison, I need to ask, how was this blockage discovered? Alexander gestured to Marcus again. Mr. Webb found it. Dr. Brown turned her full attention to Marcus for the first time. You performed the removal? Yes, ma'am. With what training? None, ma'am. Formal training, I mean. I studied on my own, textbooks, online courses. My mother was a nurse. She taught me some basics before she died. Do you understand how dangerous what you did was? Dr. Brown's voice was sharp. The tympanic membrane is less than 1/10 of a millimeter thick. One slip, one moment of excessive force, and you could have ruptured it. Caused permanent hearing loss, infection, even meningitis if bacteria were introduced. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said quietly. I was terrified the whole time. Then why did you do it? Marcus looked at Leah, at her pale blue eyes watching him from behind her headphones. Because she was in pain, and she was too scared to ask for help from the system that had already failed her, and I thought maybe I could help her without putting her through more trauma. Dr. Brown studied him for a long moment, then unexpectedly she smiled. It wasn't warm, but it was real. You should have called a doctor immediately. What you did violated every medical protocol, exposed you to massive liability, and was reckless beyond measure. She paused. And you saved her, because you did what every doctor who examined this child over 10 years failed to do. You looked, really looked, with the most basic tool available, a flashlight. She turned back to Alexander. I've reviewed the records. Leah complained of ear discomfort 7 times over the past 2 years. 7 separate incidents, all documented by her caregiver, all noted by physicians. Alexander's face went white. What? Dr. Brown pulled up the notes on her tablet. Here, March of last year, patient reports right ear discomfort, likely behavioral manifestation of frustration with hearing disability. No intervention needed. June, patient touching right ear frequently. Recommend psychological evaluation for obsessive behaviors. October, mother reports patient complaining of ear pain. Examined, no visible abnormalities, likely psychosomatic. Recommend family counseling. Stop. Alexander's voice cracked. Just stop. Dr. Brown set down the tablet. Not one physician performed a physical otoscopic examination of the deep ear canal with proper lighting. They all assumed the pain was psychological because the diagnosis of sensor and neural deafness was already established. The foreign body was deep enough and at an angle that required specific positioning to visualize, but it was there, waiting to be found. How? Alexander's voice shook with rage. How does this happen? She's been examined by the best specialists in the world, who all made the same mistake, Dr. Brown said quietly. Diagnostic anchoring. Once a patient is labeled with a specific condition, every symptom gets interpreted through that lens. It's not malice, Mr. Morrison, it's human nature. We see what we expect to see. We trust previous diagnoses, especially from prestigious institutions, and we focus on complex explanations while missing simple ones. Someone needs to be held accountable. Many people, Dr. Brown agreed. But first, Leah needs care, immediate care. She needs auditory therapy, speech therapy, psychological support for this massive sensory adjustment. Her entire world just changed. The next few weeks are going to be incredibly difficult for her. She stood and packed her medical bag. I need to take her to the hospital tonight. Full workup, independent verification, documentation. Mr. Morrison, what happened here is going to have massive medical and legal implications. Every doctor who examined Leah over the past decade is going to face scrutiny. We need to document everything properly. And Marcus? Alexander asked. Dr. Brown looked at Marcus, her expression unreadable. Mr. Webb performed an unauthorized medical procedure on a minor. Technically that's assault. Child Protective Services will need to be notified, as required by law. The medical board will want to investigate. Marcus felt his stomach drop. However, Dr. Brown continued, the outcome was successful. The child is better off than before, and the father is clearly not pressing charges. She looked at Alexander. Are you? Absolutely not, Alexander said firmly. If anyone should face consequences, it's me for creating an environment where my daughter suffered in silence. Marcus saved her. Then I'll document it as such in my report, Dr. Brown said. But Mr. Webb, you should expect some official inquiries. Be prepared to answer questions from police, CPS, and medical investigators. I understand, Marcus said. I'll handle it, Alexander said. I'm calling my lawyers tonight. Marcus will have full legal representation. If the state wants to charge someone with anything, they'll have to go through me first. Dr. Brown nodded. Fair enough. Now let's get Leah to the hospital. Mr. Morrison, you should come too. This is going to be a long night. The next 72 hours were a blur. Marcus gave statements to police twice, answered questions from a Child Protective Services investigator, sat through an interview with the hospital's medical ethics board, all while Alexander Morrison's team of lawyers surrounded him like a protective wall. Don't say anything without counsel present, they told him. Don't admit fault, don't speculate about medical outcomes. But Marcus told the truth. All of it. What he'd seen, what he'd done, why he'd done it. He didn't try to make himself sound heroic or justified. He just explained that a child had been in pain, and he'd tried to help. The police detective, a tired-looking woman named Rodriguez, had studied him for a long moment after his statement. You know, this could have gone very differently, she said. If that eardrum had ruptured, if she'd gotten an infection, if anything had gone wrong. I know, Marcus said. So why risk it? Marcus thought about his mother, about Leah's 2 old eyes, about the system that had failed them both. Because sometimes doing nothing is riskier than doing something, he said quietly. Detective Rodriguez had nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I don't think you'll face charges. Mr. Morrison has made it very clear he'll take responsibility for anything that happened on his property, and the kid is better off. That matters. The CPS investigation concluded similarly. No evidence of malicious intent. Child obviously benefited. Father supportive. Case closed with a notation in Marcus's file and a warning not to practice medicine without a license. Dr. Brown coordinated with a team of specialists at Dallas Children's Medical Center. They confirmed her findings: complete conductive hearing loss from mechanical blockage, now resolved. The auditory pathways showed potential for development. With therapy, Leah could potentially achieve functional hearing. It took a full week before all the medical reviews, legal consultations, and official investigations concluded. Only then did Alexander Morrison call the press conference that would change everything. 72 hours after Marcus Webb pulled a foreign body from Leah Morrison's ear, he stood backstage at the Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas, sweating through the white dress shirt Alexander had bought him that morning. Actually, it wasn't 72 hours, it was 10 days. 10 days of medical verification, legal review and preparation. 10 days of Marcus barely sleeping, answering the same questions over and over, wondering if his life was about to be destroyed or transformed. The ballroom was packed. Every major news outlet in Dallas, plus national media who'd gotten wind that Alexander Morrison, reclusive tech billionaire, had called an emergency press conference. Marcus had never been in front of cameras before, had never done anything that required him to be visible. Every instinct screamed at him to run. You don't have to do this, Alexander said beside him, looking perfectly composed in his tailored navy suit. I can tell the story myself. No, Marcus's voice shook, but he meant it. People need to hear it from me. They need to know I'm nobody special, that anyone could do what I did if they just paid attention. You're wrong about that, Alexander said quietly, but I understand what you mean. On the other side of the stage, Leah sat with a child psychologist and a sign language interpreter. She wore her noise-canceling headphones, lifting them occasionally to hear, then pressing them back when overwhelmed. She'd insisted on being there despite Dr. Brown's recommendation against it. My story, she'd signed to her father. I should be there. The press coordinator signaled. Alexander walked onto the stage to an explosion of camera flashes and shouted questions. He raised his hand for quiet and waited until the room settled. Thank you for coming on short notice, he said, his voice clear and controlled. 10 days ago, something happened that changed my life and should change the medical industry. But before I tell you about it, I need to introduce someone. He gestured for Marcus. Come out here. Marcus's legs felt like water, but he made himself walk onto that stage. The lights were blinding. The cameras were everywhere. Every eye in that room locked onto him, the young black man in borrowed clothes standing next to the billionaire CEO. This is Marcus Webb, Alexander said. 22 years old, maintenance worker, high school diploma, no medical degree, no formal training, no connections. He paused. And the man who did what the entire medical establishment failed to do for 10 years. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Alexander raised his hand again. For 10 years, my daughter Leah has been profoundly deaf. I consulted with specialists at Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, Great Ormond Street in London. I spent over $3 million on tests and treatments. All of them said the same thing. Her hearing loss was neurological, permanent, incurable. He pulled up a slide on the screen behind them, a brain scan showing underdeveloped auditory pathways. This is what they found. Every test, every scan confirmed the diagnosis. Another slide appeared, a photograph of the foreign body, magnified and disturbing. The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. My daughter wasn't deaf because of genetics, Alexander said, his voice cutting through the chaos. She was deaf because the remains of an insect that had been in her ear since infancy, encased in dead tissue and earwax, had completely blocked her ear canal for 10 years, creating what looked exactly like neurological deafness on every test, and missed by every doctor who examined her. He brought up another slide, medical records with 7 incidents highlighted. My daughter complained of ear pain 7 times over 2 years. 7 times she tried to tell someone something was wrong, and 7 times, medical professionals dismissed it as behavioral or psychological. Because once she was diagnosed as neurologically deaf, no one thought to check for something simple. The room was in chaos now. Alexander talked over them. I'm not here to blame individual doctors. I'm here to expose a systemic failure. We've built a medical system so dependent on advanced technology and specialist knowledge that we've forgotten the basics. We trust protocols over patients. We believe scans over symptoms, and children suffer because of it. He nodded to Marcus. Tell them. Marcus stepped forward. The microphone picked up every tremor in his voice. My name is Marcus Webb. He had to stop and swallow. Start again. My mom Patricia Webb was a nurse at Parkland Hospital for 15 years. She worked doubles and triples, any shift they'd give her, trying to save money for my college fund. He gripped the podium to keep his hands from shaking. When I was 17 my mom got sick. She had symptoms, pain, weight loss, exhaustion. But she kept putting off going to the doctor because she couldn't afford to miss work, couldn't risk the medical bills. By the time she finally went, the breast cancer was stage 4. She died 6 months later. His voice cracked. He didn't try to hide it. The medical bills were over $200,000. They took everything. My college fund, her savings, any chance I had of going to school. I became a maintenance worker so I could keep a roof over my little sister's head. Marcus looked directly at the cameras. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because the system that failed my mom is the same system that failed Leah Morrison. My mom died because she couldn't afford care. Leah suffered for 10 years because doctors stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a diagnosis. His voice grew stronger. I'm nobody. I don't have a degree or special training, but I paid attention. I listened when Leah told me she was hurting. I looked in her ear with a flashlight, just a regular LED flashlight, and saw what specialists missed, because I didn't have their blind spots. I didn't see a case file or a medical mystery. I saw a kid in pain who needed help. The room was silent now, riveted. My mom used to say that seeing people really seeing them is the most important skill in medicine. Not the technology, not the protocols, the seeing. Marcus's eyes stung with tears. She was right. And if we're going to fix this broken system, we need to remember that every patient is a person first. Every symptom deserves attention. Every complaint deserves belief. He stepped back, his whole body shaking with adrenaline. Alexander took over. Today I'm announcing the creation of the Leah Morrison Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million. Our mission is threefold: provide free hearing screenings for children, train physicians on diagnostic humility, and research overlooked causes of hearing loss. Another slide, architectural renderings of mobile clinics. We're building mobile diagnostic units that will travel across Texas offering comprehensive hearing examinations. Not just advanced tests, basic examinations. The kind that should have been done in the first place. A reporter called out, "Mr. Morrison, are you saying we should trust non-medical personnel to make medical decisions?" "I'm saying," Alexander's voice hardened, "that we should trust people who actually look and listen." Marcus Webb saved my daughter with attention and compassion, and yes, some risk. That's not an indictment of medicine. It's an indictment of arrogance. Of a system that stopped questioning itself. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Webb has been offered a full scholarship to nursing school at UT Southwestern, all expenses covered, because he deserves the chance my daughter got, the chance to be seen, to be heard, to matter. The room erupted in applause, not polite but visceral, like something had broken open in that space. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed, trying to process what had just happened. A scholarship, school, everything his mother had wanted for him, everything he'd thought was lost forever. After the press conference, backstage was chaos. Reporters swarmed Marcus with questions he couldn't answer, hands pulled at his arms. Voices demanded his attention, then a smaller hand slipped into his. He looked down. Leah stood beside him, her headphones pushed back. She looked up at him and signed with her free hand. Breathe. Marcus did. One breath, then another. Leah turned to the reporters and spoke, her voice still uncertain but clear enough. Marcus is my friend. Please don't scare him. The simple declaration from a child who'd just learned to speak made the crowd step back, chastened. Alexander appeared with his security team, creating a protective barrier. As they made their way to the exit, Thomas fell into step beside Marcus. I owe you an apology, Thomas said quietly. Marcus glanced at him. You were doing your job. My job is to protect the people in that house. I failed. Thomas's jaw tightened. I saw you as a threat when you were the only one actually seeing what was wrong. That won't happen again. It wasn't eloquent, but it was genuine. Marcus nodded, accepted. In the car back to the estate, Leah fell asleep against her father's shoulder, exhausted by the noise and crowds. Alexander stroked her hair gently, carefully, like he was learning how. She spoke in front of all those people, he said softly. 10 days ago she'd never made a sound. Now she's defending you to reporters. She's brave, Marcus said, like someone else I know. Alexander looked at him. You didn't have to say yes to all of this. The foundation work, the scholarship, living at the estate. It's a lot to take on. Marcus thought about his mother, about the promises he'd made, about Maya, waiting back at their apartment to hear the news that would change both their lives. It matters, he said simply. That's enough. Alexander smiled. Yes, it is. The Morrison press conference went viral. Not just in Dallas, not just in medical circles, but everywhere. Within 24 hours, #Leah Morrison was trending nationwide. The video of Marcus's speech hit 5 million views on YouTube. News outlets picked it up, then talk shows, then international media. But it wasn't just Leah's miracle that captured people's attention. It was Marcus, a 22-year-old who'd given up college to raise his sister, who'd lost his mother to a broken healthcare system, who'd taught himself sign language on YouTube just to make a lonely kid feel less alone, who'd risked everything to help someone he barely knew. Marcus became, almost overnight, a symbol of everything wrong with healthcare and everything right with humanity. The backlash came fast too. Medical associations issued statements about unlicensed procedures. Some doctors felt attacked, said the Morrisons were oversimplifying complex issues. Conservative commentators called it a feel-good story that ignored medical realities. Online debates raged about whether Marcus was a hero or a reckless amateur who got lucky. But the loudest voices came from an unexpected place. Parents of deaf children. Parents of kids with rare diseases, parents who'd spent years fighting to be heard, to be believed, to get someone, anyone, to take their child's suffering seriously. They flooded the Morrison Foundation website with messages. My daughter complained of headaches for a year. Doctors said anxiety. It was a brain tumor. My son had stomach pain constantly. They said he was attention-seeking. Turned out to be Crohn's disease. Thank you for saying what we've been screaming. Listen to us. Believe yo's. Within a week, over 8,000 messages, stories of dismissed symptoms, delayed diagnoses, children suffering, while doctors looked everywhere, except the obvious place. Alexander Morrison, reading through these late at night in his home office, felt something crack open in his chest. This wasn't just about Leah anymore. This was about a failure so deep, so widespread, that one press conference had unleashed years of pent-up grief and frustration. He called Marcus. It was past 11, but Marcus answered immediately. Mr. Morrison, I'm reading the messages we've received, the stories from parents. Alexander's voice was tight. Marcus, there are thousands of them, thousands of children who've been dismissed, ignored, misdiagnosed. I know, Marcus said quietly. I've been reading them too. We can't help them all, no, but we can help some, and some is better than none. Alexander closed his eyes. This young man who had every reason to be bitter, still believed in helping, still believed in trying. The foundation board wants to move slowly, Alexander said. Proper studies, careful protocols. They're worried about liability, about promising too much. What do you want to do? I want to move fast. Get mobile clinics on the road now. Start screening kids immediately. Find the ones falling through the cracks. Alexander paused. But I'm a tech CEO, not a medical professional. I don't know what's realistic. Then ask someone who does. Who? Dr. Brown. She gets it. She saw what happened with Leah and didn't defend the system. She called it out. And she's respected enough that other doctors will listen. Alexander found himself smiling despite the heaviness. When did you get so wise? My mom used to say wisdom is just pain that's been processed properly. Marcus's voice softened. I've had a lot of pain. Might as well turn it into something useful. 2 weeks after the press conference, Marcus and Maya moved into the Morrison Estates guest house. It wasn't actually a guest house, it was a fully furnished 2-bedroom cottage with a kitchen, living room and its own entrance. Bigger than any place Marcus had ever lived. Maya stood in the middle of her new bedroom, with actual closet space and a window that looked out on the garden, and started crying. Hey, Marcus pulled her into a hug. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Maya said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. That's the problem. This is too good, too perfect. What if we mess it up? What if Mr. Morrison changes his mind? Marcus pulled back to look at his sister. At 12 years old, Maya had already learned that good things didn't last. That poverty wasn't just about money, it was about never feeling safe. He's not going to change his mind, Marcus said firmly. This isn't charity, Maya, it's partnership. We're helping with the foundation. I'm going to nursing school. You're going to keep being brilliant and getting straight A's. But what if? No what ifs. Marcus cupped her face. Mom wanted better for us. She worked herself to death trying to give us better. And now we have it. We don't have to feel guilty about that. We just have to make the most of it. Maya sniffled. You really think Mama would be proud? I know she would. That night, lying in an actual bed with clean sheets in a room with working heat, Marcus couldn't sleep. It felt wrong somehow, too comfortable, like he was forgetting where he came from. His phone buzzed. A text from Leah, whose bedroom was in the main house. Can't sleep either. Garden. Marcus smiled. Be there in 5. He found Leah sitting on the stone bench by the pool, her noise-canceling headphones around her neck. The night was quiet except for crickets and the distant hum of traffic. You okay? Marcus signed as he sat beside her. Too quiet. Leah signed back. I got used to the headphones. Now regular quiet feels weird. That makes sense. You're adjusting. It takes time. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Leah signed Marcus. Can I ask you something? Always. Are you scared? Of what? Everything changing. One day you were a maintenance worker. Now you're living here, going to nursing school, working with the foundation. Aren't you scared it'll all disappear? Marcus thought about that. About how perceptive this 10-year-old was. Yeah, he signed honestly. Terrified, but I'm more scared of not trying. Of letting fear keep me small. Leah nodded slowly. Then I'm scared too. Of school, of talking, of people thinking I sound weird. You sound beautiful. You have to say that. No, I don't. Marcus turned to face her. Leah, your voice is learning, just like you're learning to hear. It won't sound like other kids' voices for a while, maybe not ever, but that doesn't make it wrong, it makes it yours. Leah's eyes filled with tears. What if they make fun of me? Then they're jerks who aren't worth your time. Marcus signed firmly. But some of them will be kind, some of them will think you're brave, and those are the ones who matter. How do you know? Because that's how it works. The world has jerks and it has good people. You can't control which ones you meet, but you can control which ones you let matter. Leah thought about that. Then she signed. You're good at this. The wise advice thing. Marcus laughed. My mom was good at it. I'm just repeating what she taught me. She must have been amazing. She was. Marcus felt the familiar ache. You would have liked her. They sat together a while longer. Two people learning to navigate new lives, taking comfort in not being alone. 3 weeks after the press conference, and 1 week before Marcus started nursing school, the first Morrison Foundation mobile clinic hit the road. It was a converted medical van, equipped with diagnostic equipment but built on a revolutionary protocol. Start with the basics. Physical examination before advanced testing. Listen to parents before dismissing concerns. Check the obvious before assuming the complex. Dr. Brown led the medical team. Marcus, still waiting for classes to start, rode along as community liaison, which meant he talked to scared kids, helped translate medical jargon, and made sure no one felt invisible. Their first stop was a community center in South Dallas, not far from where Marcus grew up. The clinic offered free hearing screenings for any child whose parents were concerned. 25 families showed up the first day. Marcus stood outside the van, greeting people as they arrived, and saw himself in every face. Tired mothers who'd taken off work they couldn't afford to miss. Fathers who looked suspicious of anything free. Kids who'd learned to stop complaining because nobody listened anyway. The fifth child they examined was a 6-year-old boy named Terrell Washington. His mother Shanice was a home health aide who worked 3 jobs. She explained that Terrell had been diagnosed with moderate hearing loss at age 2. He wore hearing aids but still struggled. He keeps saying his ear hurts, Shanice told Dr. Brown, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. But his regular doctor says it's probably just infections, says it's common in kids with hearing problems, just keep giving him the drops. Dr. Brown nodded, taking notes. How long has he been complaining? On and off for months, maybe 6-7 months. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. 7 months of a child saying he hurt, and no one checking why. Dr. Brown did a basic otoscope examination, the kind that took 2 minutes and cost nothing, and found a small plastic bead lodged in Terrell's ear canal surrounded by scar tissue. "Oh my God," Shanice whispered when Dr. Brown showed her the image on the screen. "That's been in there all this time, probably since he was very young," Dr. Brown said gently. "Maybe he put it in himself and didn't remember, or didn't know how to tell anyone. It happens more than you'd think, and it was deep enough at enough of an angle that it could be missed on a quick examination without proper lighting and positioning. But wouldn't his doctor have seen it?" Shanice's voice rose. "He's been to ear specialists, had hearing tests, everything. If they'd looked carefully with proper equipment," Dr. Brown said quietly. "But if the diagnosis was already established as sensorineural hearing loss, they might not have checked thoroughly. They'd be focused on the auditory nerve, the cochlea, not on basic blockage." Shanice started crying. "You're telling me my baby's been hurting for months, maybe years, and nobody thought to actually look in his ear?" Marcus moved closer. "Mrs. Washington, I know this is hard to hear. I know you're angry, but we can help him now. That's what matters." "Easy for you to say," Shanice said bitterly. "It's not your kid who's been suffering." Marcus thought about his mother, about watching her suffer, about being helpless. "You're right," he said quietly. "It's not my kid, but I watched my mom suffer because doctors didn't listen. I know that rage, and I know it doesn't help Terrell right now. So let's focus on helping him, and then we can figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen to other kids." Shanice wiped her eyes and nodded. Dr. Brown removed the bead, carefully, professionally, with proper anesthesia and equipment. It took 10 minutes. When it was done, she held up the tiny blue bead that had been stealing this child's hearing. Terrell looked at his mother with wonder. "Mama," he said, his voice clearer than it had been in years, "I can hear the birds." Shanice collapsed into sobs, clutching her son. Marcus turned away, his own eyes burning. This was why they were doing this. By the end of that first day they'd examined 25 children. They'd found 3 cases of foreign bodies in ear canals, a bead, a small toy piece, and what looked like an old crayon tip. 3 children who'd been diagnosed with permanent hearing loss but actually had fixable problems. 3 miracles. That night, sitting in the van while Dr. Brown filled out paperwork, Marcus got a text from Maya. Saw the news. 3 kids in 1 day. Mama would be so proud. Marcus stared at that message, then looked up at Dr. Brown. "How many kids do you think are out there with the same problem Leah had, just missed?" Dr. Brown set down her pen. "Honestly, hundreds across the state, maybe more. Misdiagnosis is more common than anyone wants to admit, especially with children whose symptoms are easy to dismiss. So we keep going, Dr. Brown agreed, until we find them all. But finding them all meant facing some hard truths. Marcus learned this lesson 3 weeks into the mobile clinic program. They examined a 7-year-old girl named Jasmine Cole. Her parents Robert and Michelle had driven 3 hours from rural Texas after seeing the news coverage, hoping desperately that maybe their daughter had been misdiagnosed too. Dr. Brown did every examination, checked the ear canals, both clear, tested auditory responses, none, reviewed medical records, comprehensive and thorough, and finally gently told the Coles what they already knew but desperately didn't want to hear. Jasmine's hearing loss is truly sensorineural. It's neurological, not mechanical. There's no blockage, no foreign object. Her auditory nerves didn't develop properly. I'm so sorry, but there's nothing we can fix. Michelle Cole's face crumpled. But that girl, Leah Morrison, you fixed her. Why can't you fix my daughter? Because their cases are different, Dr. Brown explained with infinite patience. Leah's hearing loss was caused by a physical blockage that mimicked neurological deafness. Jasmine's is true sensorineural deafness. They look similar from the outside, but the underlying causes are completely different. So there's no hope. Robert's voice broke. I didn't say that. Dr. Brown's voice was firm. Jasmine is a bright, thriving child. She's fluent in ASL. She has friends in the deaf community. She's happy. The question isn't whether she can be fixed. It's whether you can accept and celebrate her exactly as she is. The Coles left angry and heartbroken, and Marcus felt helpless watching them go. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Michelle Cole's face, the hope turning to devastation. Had they done that? Had he and Alexander created false hope for families who couldn't be helped? At 2 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, is this Marcus Webb? A woman's voice thick with emotion. Yes, ma'am. This is Michelle Cole, from the clinic today. Marcus sat up, heart racing. Mrs. Cole, I'm so sorry, don't apologize. I'm calling to apologize to you. Marcus blinked. What? I spent the last several hours reading about deaf culture. About people who are deaf and don't see it as a disability, who have their own language, their own community, their own way of being in the world. Her voice shook, and I realized something. For 7 years I've been mourning the daughter I thought I should have, instead of seeing the daughter I do have. Marcus didn't know what to say. Jasmine is perfect, Michelle continued. She's smart and creative and kind. She communicates beautifully. She has friends who love her. She's happy. But I couldn't see any of that because I was so focused on what she couldn't do. Mrs. Cole, your story, Leah Morrison's story, it made me hope Jasmine could be fixed. But what I needed wasn't for her to be fixed. What I needed was to fix my own thinking. She took a shaky breath. So thank you. Not for the miracle I wanted, but for helping me see I already had one. After she hung up, Marcus sat in the dark for a long time, processing. The next morning, he called Alexander. We need to add something to the foundation. Marcus said. What? A deaf community support program. Not to cure anyone, but to support families of deaf children who don't need or want medical intervention. Help them connect with deaf culture, learn ASL, understand that deafness isn't always something to fix. Alexander was quiet for a moment. That's not what I created the foundation for. I know, but it's what some families need. Marcus's voice was steady, because Leah's story isn't just about miracle cures, it's about seeing people really seeing them. And some deaf people don't need to be fixed. They need to be accepted, celebrated, given resources to thrive as they are. Another pause. Then you're right. Set up a meeting with deaf community leaders. Let's do this correctly. The expansion of the Morrison Foundation to include deaf community support was controversial. Some medical professionals felt it sent mixed messages. Some deaf advocates worried it was still too medicalized. But slowly, carefully, with input from actual deaf adults and parents of deaf children, they built something that honored both realities, that some hearing loss could and should be treated, and that some deaf people were perfectly fine as they were. Marcus learned sign language properly, not just survival basics, but fluent ASL. He attended deaf community events, listened to deaf perspectives, and learned that his assumptions about what people needed were often wrong. And through it all he kept studying, kept preparing for nursing school, kept working with the foundation. 6 months after the press conference, Marcus Webb started classes at UT Southwestern. Nursing school was brutal. Marcus had thought he'd prepared himself. All those years of self-study, all those textbooks he'd memorized, but the reality was something else entirely. Organic chemistry made his brain hurt. Anatomy required memorization on a scale he'd never attempted. Pharmacology felt like learning a new language. Clinical rotations meant 12-hour days on his feet with no breaks. And Marcus struggled more than he'd expected. The other students had taken the standard pre-nursing courses. They had recent experience with academic testing. They hadn't spent 5 years doing manual labor. Marcus found himself staying up until 3 a.m. studying while his classmates seemed to breeze through. His hands, conditioned for fixing electrical panels and replacing filters, cramped after hours of taking notes. He had to relearn how to be a student. The imposter syndrome was crushing. Every time he walked into a lecture hall, he felt like someone would realize he didn't belong, that he was just a maintenance worker playing at being a nurse. But he loved it. For the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't just surviving. He was building towards something, learning things that mattered, becoming the person his mother had always believed he could be. The other students didn't know what to make of him at first. He was older than most of them, 22 when most nursing students started at 20. He'd been on the news, he had a famous story. Some of them resented him, thought he got special treatment, whispered that he only got in because of Alexander Morrison's money. Marcus ignored them and focused on the work. He made friends with a handful of students who didn't care about his story, just cared about surviving the program together. He studied until his eyes crossed. He practiced skills until his hands stopped shaking. He asked for help when he needed it, swallowed his pride and slowly started to believe he actually belonged there. And every weekend he worked with the foundation. The mobile clinics had expanded, 3 vans now covering most of Texas. In 6 months they'd screened over 5,000 children. They'd found 23 cases of undiagnosed conductive hearing loss, foreign bodies, impacted earwax, structural abnormalities that had been missed. 23 children, now hearing better or completely. But they'd also connected with over 300 families who didn't need medical intervention, just support, resources and validation that their deaf children were perfect as they were. The foundation became known for both approaches, fixing what could be fixed, and honoring what didn't need fixing. Marcus became the face of that philosophy, the young man who'd saved Leah Morrison but also learned that not everyone needed saving. Leah Morrison's journey was harder than anyone expected. Learning to hear after 10 years of silence wasn't magical. It was overwhelming and frustrating and sometimes painful. Every sound was too loud or too soft or came from an unexpected direction. Her brain didn't know how to filter important sounds from background noise. Everything demanded equal attention: conversations, traffic, wind, her own breathing. And learning to speak was even harder. Her vocal cords had never been consciously used. They didn't know how to vibrate properly, how to create the subtle variations that make language. Her tongue and lips had never learned to form phonemes. For the first month she could only make rough sounds. Ah, ooh, like a baby learning from scratch, except she was 10 years old and desperately frustrated. That came first, a month of practice just to consistently make that one sound. Then Marcus for Marcus, 2 syllables that took another 3 weeks. Then gradually, painfully, other words. Each one requiring conscious effort, muscle memory that didn't exist, coordination she had to build from nothing. The speech therapist worked with her 5 days a week, hours of exercises, breathing techniques, tongue placement. It was exhausting. And when she finally started school, a mainstream school, her choice, the kids were cruel. "Why do you talk like that?" one girl asked on the first day. "You sound like a robot," a boy laughed. "Just use sign language. It's embarrassing." Leah came home crying more than once. "I want to quit," she told Marcus one afternoon. Each word still rough-edged, still requiring visible effort. Too hard. But Alexander, who was learning too, taking ASL classes 4 nights a week, reading every book on deaf culture he could find, learning to be the father he should have been, sat with her and signed as he spoke. "You don't have to use your voice if you don't want to. ASL is a complete language, a beautiful language. Many deaf people never use spoken language, and they're perfectly happy. Whatever you choose, I love you, I support you, but I want to." Leah signed back, tears streaming. Want to speak, want to hear, but so hard. Then we keep going, Alexander said. At your pace, taking breaks when you need them. But you're not alone in this. I'm learning ASL so we can always communicate, even when speaking is too hard. Okay. It took 6 months before Leah could hold a conversation in spoken English without extreme concentration. A year before she sounded relatively fluent to people who didn't know her, and even then, even 3 years later, her voice retained a unique quality. Not wrong, just distinctly hers. Slightly flat in intonation, consonants sometimes soft, a rhythm that didn't quite match natural speech patterns. Some people found it charming, some found it off-putting. Leah learned not to care, because by then she'd found her voice in other ways. Her blog, her advocacy, her willingness to stand in front of Congress and speak, slowly, carefully, with her unique voice about the children who fell through the cracks. 3 years after the day that changed everything, the Morrison Foundation held its first annual gala at the Dallas Museum of Art. The ballroom glowed with soft light, donors mixed with doctors, parents and children whose lives had been changed. 3 years of work, over 15,000 children screened, 47 cases of misdiagnosed conductive hearing loss discovered, over 1,000 families connected with deaf community resources. Marcus stood at the edge of the room in a rented tuxedo, still uncomfortable with events like this, still preferring to be invisible. But invisibility was hard when you'd been featured in Time magazine's 100 most influential people under 30. Maya found him, 17 now and stunning in a dress Alexander had bought her. She'd just been accepted to UT Dallas on a full scholarship for social work. You hiding? She asked, linking her arm through his. Just processing. Process faster. Leah's about to speak, and she'll be mad if you're not watching. They made their way to the front of the room as the lights dimmed. Leah walked onto the stage, 13 years old now, confident and poised in a simple blue dress. Her voice was strong, still uniquely hers but clear and purposeful. Hello, she said, and the room fell silent. My name is Leah Morrison. 3 years ago I couldn't hear, couldn't speak, lived in silence. She paused, letting the words land. But I wasn't really silent, I was screaming, trying to tell people I hurt, that something was wrong. Nobody heard me, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't know how to listen. Leah found Marcus in the crowd, made eye contact, smiled, then someone listened. Not a doctor, not an expert, just a person who cared enough to pay attention. Her voice grew stronger. Marcus taught me that being heard isn't about volume, it's about someone choosing to listen. She held up her hands and signed as she spoke. I still use sign language. I still struggle with sound sometimes. I'm still learning what it means to hear. But I'm not broken. I never was. The audience was riveted. The Morrison Foundation isn't about fixing people. It's about seeing them, hearing them, believing them when they say something's wrong. She looked at Alexander in the front row. My dad built an empire on technology and control. But he learned that love is about letting go, about listening, about trusting. Alexander's eyes glistened. So thank you, Leah finished, to everyone who supports this work. To the families who've trusted us, to the deaf community who've taught us that different doesn't mean broken. She signed one final phrase, we don't need to be fixed, we need to be seen. The applause was thunderous. Leah smiled, bright, confident, completely herself, and walked off stage. Marcus met her backstage. She threw her arms around him. Was I okay? She asked. You were perfect, Marcus said. Absolutely perfect. Later that night, after the gala ended and most guests had left, Marcus found himself alone in the Morrison garden. The same spot where everything had begun 3 years ago. Alexander found him there. Thought I might find you here, Alexander said, sitting on the stone bench. He'd loosened his tie, shed his CEO armor for the night. Just thinking, Marcus said, about how different everything is. 3 years ago I was about to be evicted. Broke, desperate, invisible. Now Marcus gestured helplessly. I don't even know what I am. You're a third-year nursing student at the top of your class, Alexander said. Medical director of community outreach for a foundation that's changed thousands of lives. Honorary big brother to my daughter. And the person who taught me how to be a father. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I don't feel like that person. I still feel like the scared kid trying not to get evicted. Good, Alexander said. That fear keeps you human, keeps you connected to the people we're trying to help. He paused. But Marcus, you're allowed to acknowledge how far you've come. Your mother would be proud. I know I am. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Do you think we're actually changing things, or are we just putting band-aids on a broken system? Both, Alexander said honestly. We've found 47 kids who'd been missed. That's 47 lives changed forever. But there are thousands more we haven't reached, and a system that keeps failing them. So yes, we're making a difference, and no, it's not enough. It's never enough. Then what do? We keep going. We train more doctors, we push for protocol changes, we tell more stories, we make it impossible for the medical system to ignore what we've proven. Alexander looked at him. And we trust that the right people like you, will keep fighting even when it's hard. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the Dallas sky. Marcus, Alexander said, eventually I've been meaning to ask you something. When you graduate next year, what do you want to do? Marcus had been thinking about this a lot. I want to work at Parkland Hospital, where my mom worked. In the ER probably, where cases come in messy and urgent. Where I can be the nurse who catches what others miss. Alexander nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd say that, you were, because that's where you're needed most. Prestigious hospitals have plenty of brilliant staff. Parkland needs people who care more about patients than prestige. Alexander smiled. Your mom would approve. Yeah, Marcus said softly. She would. 6 years later, Marcus Webb, 28 years old, stood in his office at Parkland Hospital's emergency department. It was a small office, nothing fancy, but it had a window overlooking the Dallas skyline. And on the wall hung 3 photographs, his mother in her nurse's scrubs, smiling at the camera during a rare break. Leah at age 10, signing hello to him for the first time. The original stick figure drawing she'd given him, preserved behind glass, 2 people finally seeing each other. Marcus had graduated nursing school at the top of his class 3 years ago. He'd been recruited by prestigious hospitals, offered comfortable positions with high salaries. But he'd chosen Parkland, the public hospital where his mother had worked, where Dallas's poorest patients came when they had nowhere else. He'd chosen the ER where cases came in chaotic and urgent, where he could be the nurse who looked deeper, listened harder, caught what others missed. And he was good at it, really good. His supervisors said he had an instinct for seeing the unusual. His patients said he made them feel heard. Marcus knew the truth, he just paid attention, the way his mother had taught him. Maya was in her senior year at UT Dallas now, studying social work, already being recruited by agencies. The system that had failed them as kids was about to face Maya Webb as an advocate, and Marcus almost felt sorry for it. Leah was 16, a nationally recognized disability rights advocate, preparing to testify before Congress about healthcare reform. She'd been featured in documentaries, written articles for major publications, and somehow stayed grounded through all of it. Her voice was her own now, still uniquely textured, still requiring extra effort, but powerful. And she used it, and the Morrison Foundation had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. Mobile clinics in 15 states, over 80,000 children screened, 132 cases of misdiagnosed hearing conditions discovered, over 5,000 families connected with deaf community support. But more than numbers, a fundamental shift in pediatric medicine. New protocols required basic physical examinations before advanced testing. Medical schools taught courses on diagnostic humility and the danger of anchoring bias. The Morrison Standard had become shorthand for patient-centered care that listened to patients and parents. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from Alexander, board meeting next week, expanding to Canada, need your input on protocols. Marcus smiled, he was a nurse and a foundation director, and Maya's guardian and Leah's honorary big brother. His life was full and complicated and exhausting and perfect. Another text from Leah, finished my speech for Congress. Want to read it before I submit? Marcus typed back, always. Proud of you, little sister. Leah's response was immediate. Couldn't have done it without you. Marcus looked out his office window at the Dallas skyline, at the city where he'd lost everything and found everything. where he'd learned that the worst moments can become the most important moments if you choose to let them change you. His mother's voice echoed in his memory one last time. "Baby, sometimes God breaks your heart to make room for bigger dreams." She'd been right. His heart had broken when he lost her. Shattered completely, but in that broken space something grew, the ability to see pain in others, the courage to act when everyone else looked away, the faith that one person paying attention could change everything. That was his mother's real legacy. Not the medical debt or the struggle, but the lesson: see people, love people, help people. Marcus had spent 6 years doing exactly that. He would spend the rest of his life doing it, because that's what mattered. That's what would always matter. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. A resident poked her head in. "Marcus, we've got a kid in Bay 3, 6 years old, chronic ear pain, been dismissed by 3 doctors as behavioral. Mom's desperate. I thought maybe you could take a look." Marcus felt something settle in his chest. Purpose, clarity, the reason he was here. "On my way," he said, grabbing his stethoscope. As he walked toward Bay 3, Marcus thought about all the children he'd helped over 6 years, all the families he'd listened to when no one else would, all the moments where paying attention made all the difference, and he thought about the child waiting in Bay 3, scared, hurting, hoping someone would finally believe them. Marcus would believe them, he would see them, because that's what his mother had taught him, that's what Leah had reminded him. That's what mattered more than degrees or protocols or prestigious positions. Seeing people, really seeing them, and choosing to help even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, that was the real miracle, and it happened every single day.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.